Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to decode a movie that, well, a lot of people have completely forgotten. We're looking at Kevin Costner's 1997 epic, The Postman. Now, let's be real, this film was heavily criticized back in the day for its staggering 3-hour runtime and, honestly, its massive earnestness. It was a flop, but we're going to put on two different essayists' hats today to show you why that reputation is kind of unfair. We'll be acting as the cultural anthropologist who looks at human myth and the cynical film historian who dissects the movie's obsession with bureaucracy. Because hidden beneath the surface of the cinematic misfire is actually a brilliant, profound sociological debate about exactly how societies rebuild after they completely collapse. So let's just dive right in with a question that sounds, frankly, completely ridiculous. Can a fake mailman save humanity? I mean, that is the literal premise of the story. And on one level, yeah, it sounds like an absurd joke. But as we unpack this film, using our two essayist perspectives, you're going to see how this seemingly silly concept actually disguises a brilliant exploration of human psychology. It's all about our desperate need for order and the literal foundations of civil society. To give you a sense of scale, the civilizational scope of this story is absolutely massive. We kick things off in 2013. And hey, remember, 2013 was the distant future when this movie was made back in 1997. So it's roughly 15 years after some unnamed apocalyptic event involving war and total societal collapse. The world is just a broken, isolated wasteland. But the story ultimately takes us all the way to 2043, to this peaceful, restored techno-utopia. The entire narrative is about bridging the gap between these two completely opposite realities and the totally unexpected way humanity actually gets from point A to point B. Part 1. The Forgotten 1997 Apocalypse. Okay, to truly understand this world, we're going to be using two competing lenses. Our cultural anthropologist argues that this film is fundamentally a story about the staggering power of myth. It's about symbolism and our deep, hardwired human need for a shared society. Meanwhile, our film historian takes a much more cynical view, analyzing the film as this bizarrely earnest argument for bureaucracy, civil service, and order as the true apex of human achievement. So keep both of these lenses in the back of your mind as we walk through what happens. Picture this. It's 2013. Modern technology? Completely gone. Infrastructure has crumbled to dust and humanity has retreated into these isolated, deeply paranoid walled towns. Trust is literally non-existent, and wandering right into this bleak wasteland is our protagonist, a nameless, cynical drifter. And guys, he is not a hero. In fact, he gets by just traveling between these highly suspicious settlements, performing these terrible one-man Shakespeare routines in exchange for scraps of food and shelter. He is entirely indifferent to rebuilding tomorrow. His only goal is just surviving today. Part 2. A Lie for a Sandwich. So, how does this all kick off? Well, first, our drifter gets forcibly conscripted into the Holnists. They are this brutal neo-fascist militia that rules the wasteland through absolute terror. But he actually manages to escape during a freezing storm. Desperate for warmth, he stumbles upon a rusted, totally abandoned U.S. Postal Service Jeep. Inside, he finds a skeleton, a bag of undelivered mail, and a postman's uniform, which he puts on literally just to keep from freezing to death. Eventually, he makes it to a walled town called Pineview, but the armed guards completely refuse to let him in. So he pulls out an old letter from the bag and just improvises. He claims he's a representative of the restored United States government, lying through his teeth just to get inside for a warm meal. And you know what? The townsfolk completely buy it. And he accidentally inspires a massive civilizational movement. This crucial point is perfectly captured by our cultural anthropologist persona. He doesn't want to save the world, he wants a sandwich. It is just incredible absurdity. The protagonist is fundamentally a con artist in this moment. The entire foundation for this massive hopeful movement isn't born out of some grand philosophical vision or this deep desire for justice. Nope, it is born purely out of a drifter's hunger. He fabricates this giant lie about a restored government, completely underestimating just how starved the human beings around him are for literally anything to believe in. Part 3. The Staggering Power of Myth. When that drifter walks into Pineview, that uniform, it isn't just fabric anymore. It acts as a liturgy of a civilized past. The mere sight of that postman uniform and a physical piece of mail causes the townspeople to literally weep. It represents connection, order, and hope. Things they fully 100% believed were dead forever. The moment he crosses that threshold, carrying a letter, he accidentally resurrects the very concept of a shared society right in their minds. And this localized spark of hope quickly builds into an actual revolution. There's this young, idealistic kid in Pineview named Ford Lincoln Mercury, who takes the drifter's lie completely to heart. He actually begins organizing a network of brave young couriers, completely independent of the drifter. Suddenly, you've got young postmen and postwomen wearing uniforms, riding horses between settlements, and spreading actual defiance against the warlords. The postal network starts spreading literacy and communication. The drifter actually tries to run away from all of this, but the sheer momentum of the hope he created forces him into leadership, right alongside a fierce woman named Abby. And Abby really comes to represent the very domestic future they are all fighting to secure.
Part 4. Bureaucracy versus raw Darwinism.
Now, bring in the film historian. Because when we think of post-apocalyptic sci-fi, we think of Mad Max, right? We think leather, chrome, and total lawless chaos. But the historian points out that the Postman does the exact opposite. It makes this deeply conservative cinematic argument that standard federal institutions, civil service, and bureaucracy are actually the ultimate apex of human achievement. It's a bizarrely earnest ode to the mail system, which contrasts wildly with the typical rugged individualism we always expect to see at the end of the world. Let's look at the actual matchup here. This ideological conflict pits General Bethlehem, who represents raw Darwinism and absolute terror, against the Postman, who represents democracy and the mundane miracle of communication. Just think about how radical that is for a sci-fi action film. The ultimate weapon against a bloodthirsty warlord isn't a nuclear bomb or some cool laser rifle. The ultimate weapon against tyranny is literally a kid on a horse delivering a birthday card. The movie argues that isolation breeds tyranny, but communication breeds community.
Part 5. When fiction becomes reality.
General Bethlehem isn't an idiot. He realizes the postal network is a direct threat to his power, because if people believe the government exists, they stop fearing him. So he attacks. But in a brilliant, totally unexpected twist, the final showdown isn't one with massive explosions. To prevent a bloody war, the postman uses Bethlehem's own rules against him. He challenges the warlord to a one-on-one duel based on the Holonists' own clan laws, and the postman wins. But crucially, he demands the men lay down their arms, sparing their lives and finally stopping that cycle of violence. Because he chooses communication and order over bloodshed, the movie jumps decades later to 2043, where a peaceful, restored society has dedicated a bronze statue to the postman, the man who taught them to look beyond their own walls.
It all boils down to this incredible idea. The fiction becomes the friction that sparks the reality. The great irony of this entire story is that the restored United States absolutely did not exist when the Postman started writing. That community was built entirely on a hoax, but it came into existence specifically because the people chose to believe the lie. It is the ultimate manifestation of the fake-it-till-you-make-it philosophy, just executed on a civilizational scale. The shared myth literally willed a new, functional reality into existence.
Which brings us to a final provocative question. If civilization collapsed tomorrow, what myth would you choose to believe? The Postman shows us that our institutions, our governments, and our societies are fundamentally just shared stories that we all agree to participate in. And when the walls fall down, the most important tool for rebuilding isn't a weapon, it's the story we choose to tell each other next. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this gives you a completely new perspective on the power of the myths we share every single day.